Tim, how are you, sir?
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
Good. And your background is a lot cooler than my classroom background behind
I'm
me.
definitely, yeah. I built this just to impress college students when I Zoom. That's all.
Yeah, dude. Thank you, dude. Thanks for meeting, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Um, I guess like before I get into like where did you go to college and how are you, like by the way, Tim is the reason I do all of my drawing on an iPad with an Apple Pencil. So it's
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, yeah,
I'm your
because remember,
advocate.
well, do you remember I showed you I like that Netflix bought me that massive Cintiq with all that stuff? I don't even enjoy using it because I love just the iPad with the Apple Pencil so much.
I mean,
So,
I'm drawing as we speak. So yes, this is.
um, could you give them a little context of like I shared your Wikipedia page with them, but just like in the it's like, pretend they didn't glance at it. I'm assuming they didn't. So, um, what are
Sure.
some of the stuff you worked on? And
Well, I mean, I come primarily from comics. So I started out as a comic artist. So I've drawn for Marvel and DC and worked on all kinds of stuff. And then also, became a sort of writer artist, and so I was writing a lot of my own work. And so I've been writing for DC Comics, and then also uh, for film and for animation. And recently, I worked on Mortal Kombat Onslaught. I was one of two writers doing narrative work on that game. And then I've also wrote a film, and I'm working on a animated series currently. So I'm always making some damn thing, and I'm drawing as we speak because I have 20 pages due this week. So I get to talk and draw, which is something you get used to when you do my job.
that's awesome. Yeah. And then, dude, I really appreciate you taking the time considering all the stuff you
My
have going on.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I owe you big time. You're the guy that got me into coming into schools and talking to people about stuff. And when I talk to people, I enjoy the job more for some reason. Like reminds me why I like it. So I owe you for re-inspiring me. So we've just traded off inspiration since we've started.
I appreciate that. Something makes me feel though that I'm getting a bigger gift on my end. But okay, I guess then let me ask like where did you go to college and how did that lead to you getting into your first job out of college or comics or whatever?
Yeah, so I went to school at a place called University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. It is not a fancy school at all. It's just a state school in Wisconsin. But one of the reasons I chose it was that they had an illustration program, and this is back in like the late '90s, so before most of you guys were born. But they would let you kind of do what you wanted in a time where there wasn't really any cartooning programs, there wasn't really any comics programs, especially not in Wisconsin. So I went to Eau Claire because they let me kind of make my own program, and they let me do comics, and they also let me do an internship at Marvel Comics. My senior year, which really helped me figure out how this actually works and how to work in it. So it ended up being very beneficial for me personally, even though it's not like I walk into a job and go University of Wisconsin Eau Claire and everybody goes ooh, like they don't. But it did help me like get connections and do stuff that I probably wouldn't be able to do at the time in Wisconsin education stuff.
Were you raised in Wisconsin?
I am from Wisconsin. I grew up in Wausau, which is a town of about 30,000 people. I actually grew up in a suburb of Wausau in a town of about 1,400. So I'm very big time, obviously.
Yeah, small high school class. And so, what was your first gig out of college and what was your portfolio like to get that job?
My first gig out of college, I got a job at a children's book company called Learner Publications, and they specialized in educational children's books. So I had an illustration degree, and I had a portfolio full of comic stuff, but it worked out nicely because their plan was that they were eventually going to get into doing educational graphic novels. So they hired me to come in. There was just a gig they needed done. When you take tests when you're in high school or grade school, and then they can't reproduce the photo, so you have somebody draw like a black and white illustration. That was me. That was my first job there. I just did tons of those, thousands of illustrations, and then they hired me to sort of set them up with a plan towards doing more graphic novels and stuff like that. So I did that for about 2 years. So I was working as a children's book company at night, and I was doing indie comics during the day. or either way, wait, flip it the other way around. Sorry, I had COVID this week, so my brain's a little fried. So that helped me kind of, I was doing both things, and they didn't really directly feed each other, but I was constantly drawing, which I think was really necessary for those earlier things. Because even in college, I think you don't end up drawing enough. Like when you end up going out in the real world and draw, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, that's what really gets you ready to do the job and be really flexible. I think that's kind of what really helped me is that, and to this day, like I can work in any medium and draw anything in any style. That's like the benefit I got out of those first jobs.
I was talking to one of the students in my class, and there's a fear with art, that you won't get a gig, right? And I understand. For me, it's like kind of about like, well, if the quality of your work is there, like people want to hire you for something and they'll give you money, right? Do you feel like the current industry now? I mean, is it better for artists? Is it worse than artists? Like, what do you think?
I think it's better. It's better for like auteurs. Like it's better for people with a voice. And I think once you kind of figure out a style and a thing you do, um, people will come to you for that, and they'll come to you now because the way technology works. Like if you're really good cartoonist, they might hire you for an animated series, or they might put you on a video game or something like that, which has worked for me. But I think what's worse now is actually the first jobs, because so much of that stuff now can be replaced by like a prompt on an AI or something. So some of that stuff that helps you get in, which is like they're largely crappy jobs. The bummer is that those crappy jobs have kind of been replaced a little bit by AI. And I know a lot of people who use like, who work at ad agencies that used to hire out for stupid stuff like comps and all that kind of shit. Like now they'll use Midjourney just for a comp. Like they can't own those things. They can't turn that into something later. But for now, like just for a quick thing, that they're fine with using that. I think that's what makes it a little bit harder now. It's just like those entry level, like I would call them donkey jobs. Like they're a job that doesn't it's not super creative, but it is artistic. I think they're harder to come by now. That's a bummer. But I do think there's more and more opportunities for like people to do their own thing, which is good. You can run a Kickstarter, you can create something, you can do your own stuff now in a way that you couldn't before. But it puts a lot of the risk on the creator. So it's as always, it's a double-edged sword. Like that, you just never get away with things not being good in one way and then going shitty in the other way. Like it's just how everything works these days.
Um, what did you see in, because in the past you've hired students to work, and I mean that's a huge break for them, right? Because they're working on a professional thing that's in mass publications. What did you see in their work that let you give them a shot, to help you with your stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, I actually have an assistant that I got from Columbia. Sarah, she was one of my first students, and she has to come over today and help me with this book. And I pay her, and I think the thing I saw in her was that she was just like, give me anything, like she wasn't my necessarily strongest storytelling student. She was a good artist, she's a good colorist, but she was just like open to trying anything. And I think she came from my cartooning class, and I think a thing that I find a lot with a lot of students weren't given the opportunity to tell stories. Like if you come from video games or you come from animation, you learn the technical part, which is great. You should definitely learn the technical part. But what ends up actually being more useful is if you're willing to be able to tell stories and that you want to put your spin on it and you want your voice to be part of it. And I think that's what people are interested in. So, when I see that, that's when I can that's something I can work with. And I tend to give opportunities to people who, are just like, I don't know. Yeah, you need help with layouts. I'll do it. I'll figure it out. And great, because that's what I need. And that's also something I can collaborate with. Like if you're open-minded and if you're, interested in sort of like, I don't know how to do this, but tell me how you need it done. It's just something I can use in a way that I can't use as much like rigid ideas of what someone wants to do. I think that's what I hope more people would have those opportunities. I think those are the things that maybe are sort of there are less of them, but I still have them. Like I still have stuff where I just like, hey, I just need help on this, and it may seem like it's crappy work, but it will get you a job. And for Sarah, my assistant, she now colors my hack slash book because I just needed someone to do it, and she was there, and she said, "I'll do it," and she did it. And she did a great job, and now she colors the book. She gets paid every month.
Yeah, I want to highlight two quick comments that you made that I think is pretty profound. One, I had that student in my other class at Columbia, and I was always blown away by her punctuality of submitting work on time, beyond on time, and her follow-up was unbelievable. Like the
Yes.
level of enthusiasm and excitement is like kind of rare. And then the second thing is my classes are highly technical because there's coding and stuff. And so I am always blown away. And I just wanted to bring this point up that you made, which is always ends up kind of being a sign of success for later down the line, with or without us as helpers, is they take that and they put their own spin on it, right? Like they're making this pig game out of the tutorials that I'm doing, and they didn't need me for that. It's not required at all for this class to get an A. And I had students, like I said, it's always nice to see people do things without you asking, like
Yeah.
I
Yes.
and I it makes me less worried about, if people are interested in doing this sort of thing. Okay, I'm gonna circle back to your origin story. Where did you go after the children's book? How did you get that gig?
Uh, I was looking for gigs. Had moved to Minneapolis. I was looking for stuff, and it really was the kind of philosophy that I'm now sort of espousing. People is I just went anywhere, and I'd heard that there was a children's book company in downtown Minneapolis. I didn't know much about it. I just had heard that it existed, and I just walked into the front door and was like, "Hey, I do illustration. I'm kind of looking for something." And they were, it was maybe something you wouldn't probably do now, but I was just like, "Hey, I'm looking for something." I dropped off a packet of stuff and I said, I'll be around today if anybody wants to look at my stuff. And there was a guy there who was just like one of those dudes who said, you know what, I just happen to need something right now, and it was those illustrations. And he called me and he's like, can you pull this off? Can you do this, quickly? And can you do it? You know, it's not going to be so super fun. I was like, yes, I'll do it. And so I started doing that, and I think that guy felt like he owed me, so then he hired me on full time. So it's always that kind of thing. It's obviously one as big as who you know, right? I mean and you don't have to know someone super well, or you don't have to have like rich parents in well placed positions, but having like just like some way to say, hey, I heard you're cool. Someone said you're a nice person. Someone said you work hard. That's really useful. And for this, it was sort of just kind of luck that I stumbled into that, but that was enough of a first gig that it helped me get other jobs. And I think the hardest part for post college students is that first gig. That's the toughest thing. And there's a tendency, I think, when you get out of college to go, well, I need some money. And so you go and work something like that pays, but it's not creative. And then 5 years later, you're like, shit, well, it slipped by. And I think you have to take those things that may not pay very well, but they're in the field that you want to do it. And, even if it seems kind of embarrassing, often those things lead to more opportunities. And that's kind of, I guess I felt like I should pay it forward because someone did it to me.
That's
Right.
awesome. Do you guys, I'm gonna kind of gear this back to the students. Tim has experience in film, games, and comics. Did any question pop in anybody's mind? Because I don't want, I feel bad. Like I love talking to Tim. I'm probably gonna try to hang out with him this weekend. So like,
Hey, let's go get a beer.
yeah, exactly. Do any of you have any questions that come to mind? If not, it's okay right now. I'm putting you on the spot. I'll circle back. All right, hold those thoughts. And honestly, I'm sure questions pop in and out of your heads. Just find a piece of paper or something and just take a note on the side, because otherwise it'll slip away into your brain while I jabber on with Tim. Um, I think after that, did you go on to Marvel Comics? Because you were young when you got into Marvel, right?
But because I had interned there as when I was in college. So I worked there for a
Okay.
summer in college. And then I ended up going freelance. I moved to Chicago. I
Minneapolis.
started working for another
Okay.
company, and then I was doing the people I'd worked with as an intern. Some of them were still there, so I would throw out my samples, and working at this other company made me better. I was drawing all the time, and so my stuff was ready. And then I ended up working in Marvel about like 2007, 2008, somewhere in there as a freelancer. So they were sort of the first big company besides the smaller companies I worked at to hire me. but it's all freelance, so it's not like,
But
you
what
know,
titles did you work in? Like anything
my
cool
first gigs were some X-Men stuff. I did yeah, I actually did an X-Men book with like the big X-Men writer. So it was like, it was quite a glow up, it was like from nothing to the top. But then, and then I sort of bounced around as a freelancer for years. I mean, just like, and I still kind of bounce around as a freelancer. It's sort of, I'm doing a book for Marvel now. I'm also doing for DC, but then I'll go months without I do something else. And, it's just kind of always being available for opportunities is kind of how I have to do it.
Hmm. How did you start your own comic?
I mean, it was mostly out of frustration because I was working for bigger companies, and they obviously have restrictions on what they want you to do, and I was young enough and sort of aggressive and thought myself punk rock enough to be like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm gonna do my own thing. I do whatever I want, and I did it, and I kind of put everything I wasn't allowed to do in those books into this one, and I think that's what made it successful. It was like a protest comic, and so it really did sort of like launch me to be able to do my own stuff as well.
Um, and that's Hack Slash, right? Your Hack Slash series.
Yep.
But when you created, how did you get Image Comics to publish it? Like by then you had worked on G.I. Joe, bunch of stuff from Marvel, DC. You had finished the Grayson series by then, right? The Dick
So
Grayson.
that's later. That was
Oh,
later.
that's later. Wow. Okay.
I
But how
yeah,
did you? Because Image is a major. I know it's employee-owned publisher, but it's like that's a major company to get them to take on a brand new IP. How did
yeah.
you get them to?
I think I mean a lot of it was I right time, right place, but I had done a book fair with another company. It was actually here in Chicago, and I met the publisher of Image, and I took him out for drinks, and we hung out and we hit it off, and that's how I got it there, pretty much. So so surprising no one, again, it's still who you know, right? It's you have to have the chops, but you also have to be someone that people remember or like or something. So and it kind of sucks. I think people get frustrated sometimes about how much that is important to the job, but you know, when you work for people, it's not just how good you are. It's also, can they trust you? Do they believe that you'll get the job done? Do they believe that you'll be a good person and that you won't tarnish the name of the company? Or, so a lot of it is just like sitting down with someone and so that helped me tremendously.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, what's interesting about Tim's book, and that's revolutionary, the Hack Slash book, is he has major film character, like horror characters, like Chucky. Is it Jason? Like, what other characters are in your book that your main characters are fighting against?
Yeah, we had Chucky, we had the character Reanimator, we had Victor Crowley, we had we had, one of the things I learned about horror that's great, and again, this is again a who you know thing. Most movie titles are owned by major studios, so they're owned by Warner Brothers, or they're owned by, but horror movies are low budget, and often that means that the studio didn't put any money in them. People took risks themselves, and they made it. That's true of Chucky, and that's true of Jason and Michael Myers even. And so people own them, not companies. So again, if you go to a horror convention or something and you end up hanging out with some of these people, you can get them to give you the rights to their characters just by being cool. So being likable. So that's a kind of a cheat, I think, a little bit that I figured out early was that like, and I think my lesson in working in this field always has been, if you can get around major companies, if you can get around big corporations, people are easier to deal with than other stuff. So
Mm.
especially with games and stuff, Mortal Kombat, though it is owned by Warner Brothers, is run by one dude, and that's Ed Boon. And so you're much. It's easier to work with NetherRealm because it's a guy instead of like a panel and a board of directors and and so though it is corporate, in that case, it's just much easier to do when you're dealing with just individuals rather than whole faceless companies.
No, and that's a good point. I worked on Mortal Kombat versus DC,
Yeah,
and like it was awesome because he owns Mortal Kombat. Him
right.
and
Yeah,
God, what's
Tobias.
his name? And what?
Tobias. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Joe. Yeah, Josh Tobias, right? And like, um, So it was cool because any stuff I wanted to make to like I worked on like the green like just like whatever Green Lantern character. I remember that was one of the characters I was working on, and it was like cool because they DC gave him like carte blanche because they wanted it to match the Mortal Kombat style. So I didn't have to go through these like have their legal team sign off on my work and all this stuff, and that was really awesome.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're always better when you can find humans. Obviously, that's sort of becoming less
yeah,
common, sadly, but it's always best when you can.
yeah, for sure. I think because there's a ad student and a couple film students in here, and I wanted to kind of cover that as well, that world. Um, how did you, is it Paramount Pictures that you were talking to at one point about, like, is it that the right company for Hack Slash movie?
Well, at the time, it was. I mean, it's been everything, but yeah,
Yeah.
it keeps getting bought. It was NBC Universal, and then it was yeah. So, uh, but yeah, I sold it to NBC Universal, and then it became a different company because that's how Hollywood works. But yeah,
No, and it's hard because they option it sometimes, they sit on it, they
yeah.
like what were those negotiations like? Was that a fun experience? Was it miserable? And just in general, like you've done other like you've storyboarded too for TV and film too, right?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
what is all of that stuff like? I guess like what is the experience working in Hollywood like? From
Uh,
Chicago even, it's
yeah. It's harder to do when you're here in some ways because obviously all the work and the companies are there. On the other hand, it's kind of nice because you're farther from the big bosses. So like you're able to, I think you can get away with more because there's the less expectation that you like come into all this corporate stuff, and so when I do it, it's always for me, it's usually pretty pleasant. And I think I used to think I sort of breathed rare air with Hack Slash. I was like, holy crap, I sold it to this company, and they're gonna make it, and I'm getting to work with the director, and then corporate stuff happened, and they got bought by another company, and they fired everybody, and so all the things that people told me would happen is like, yeah, it happened. So I think when you work with Hollywood, it's so and it's becoming more and more this way is that it's extremely risk adverse. Uh, they and they're afraid to do stuff. They have to do stuff, but they're afraid to do stuff. So I think like you get when you work with this stuff, you accept a certain amount of like it's out of my hands, you know. And so I'm glad I got to work with the studios and I sold Hack Slash. That's great. I got a check, but also I'm very aware like this may never get made, and that's okay. I think a big part of working in Hollywood is accepting, and video games too, is accepting that maybe these things won't come out, and that's just part of the job.
yeah.
Comics is a lot easier because it's cheaper and it's faster, and so you have more expectation that things will actually happen because you've spent $8,000 rather than $8 million.
Yeah,
So that makes a huge difference.
and that's why like I was talking to you before because you have like those Hack Slash toys and figures and stuff. And I made this game, Leo versus Robot, and we met with Hasbro and they optioned it and did nothing with it. And I regret optioning it with them because they like promise you the world. They're like, we're gonna make a toy line of the Leo versus Robot. Your stuff is awesome. And we could see this becoming a cartoon because we have Hasbro Interactive and Hasbro Animation. And you're right, like you're like, oh, finally I get to recoup the money I spent building out this idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's coming close to the 6 year. They gave me a 6 year option, so I'm going to get my stuff back. But like, does anybody care about it anymore? I don't know. Like, I'm going to have to invest all that energy again to get this thing to become alive. You
But
know?
you got to check. I mean, it's always this sort of you got to check from Hasbro for the option. So maybe at the time the money was worth it. I think that is the thing. And if I had a warning for anybody, and you can back this up, is like sometimes that money is not worth it. You could have done something better by yourself. But man, sometimes you just need a check for 60 grand.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
so it's a tough call. And when we first option Hack Slash, the check was for like it was for like $35,000. And at the time I was 25, 26, and I needed an apartment. And so,
Yeah,
it was love,
yeah.
but
Here's my year's rent.
oh,
Like,
right.
it's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
so,
So, I think it's a weird thing. You don't ever want to sort of uh, waste opportunities, but you also don't want to make choices that I think sometimes you have to invest in yourself, and that can be hard to do.
okay. I know we don't have a lot of time because this class is almost over. Um, Do you have a minute to show a little bit of your work? If not, I'll just open it up to questions, or if you guys have questions now.
I can show my I can show my let's see, here's my website. I put a bunch of my stuff on here. So I've got my
Oh,
illustration,
dude, you worked
stuff.
on Evil Dead stuff.
Yeah,
You've
I
worked
did,
on
yeah.
everything.
Yeah. We actually did a Hack Slash versus Army of Darkness comic. But yeah, you can see a lot of stuff I put in my writing, my illustration, the creative stuff I do for other companies. So, I've got tons of stuff on here because I've been doing this for so long. I mean, I also did the beer label for the Zombie Dust. the
Oh, no way, really?
the beer Zombie Dust, that was me. There's my label right there. Uh, I worked on Andre Vasquez, the alderman. I worked on his campaign. I did posters. So, at this point, like you do this stuff long enough, you just have so many weird jobs that have come up and come and gone. So I put as much of my stuff, if anybody wants to check out, it's timseeleycreative.com. You can get a good idea of what I've done.
Yeah, I'll share it with them too. Thanks, Tim. All right, any questions from you all, or I'll let everyone get on with their lives. If they come up with anything later, Tim, can I share that with you or reach out
Yeah,
to you?
of course. Yeah. Anytime.
Because I have a couple students in this class who are actually really, really good illustrators, and like, I'd love to share their work with you if they're open to it. No pressure.
Sure.
So,
Anytime. Yeah. Happy to see it.
Tim, thank you so much, man. And
Always
I
good to see you.
definitely we'll get a group together. We'll hang, or I'll just come by, man. I'd be cool to have just
Anytime.
hang with you for sure, Tim.
I'm
I'll
over
get
it, so I'm good. I got over it. I only had it for 3 days, so I'm feeling good.
Yeah. And Wad's pregnant with kid number 2, so I think she needs a break from me,
Yes.
with all that stuff. So I'll come by and see you, man. All right.
All right. Thanks so
Thank
much,
you.
guys.
See you.
All right.
Bye,
Good
Tim.
luck.
Thanks. See you. All right, everybody. I'm here if you guys have any questions. Really, just the point I want to make before I let you go. I have all the videos there. I'm available even on the weekend if you guys needed to go on Zoom. Just power through those videos the best that you can. And if you need help, I can share scripts or whatever just to get you guys to that point. Make sense? All right. I'm proud of you guys that you showed up. I actually invited like 3 or 4 classes to this, and you guys were the only one. So hopefully everyone else had a conflict. But did you guys feel like this was okay? You want to do more of this or no? Yeah? Okay. All right. I'll see you guys later.